Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, where we explore innovative ideas with the people working to create a sustainable circular economy. And today we're going to talk about how do you build the future? Designing the future of civilization is no small task, and a new class of tool known as digital twins, which are computer models of complex systems, is poised to transform how we test our assumptions about the impact of new designs, new policies, and their consequences before making the changes in the real world. Digital twins could power faster and more effective decision-making as we march toward the decarbonization of society. Our guest today is Michael Jansen, a pioneer of digital twin technology. He's the founder and CEO of Cityzenith, and their urban digital twins, product platform of theirs, are 3D virtual models of real-world designs that test low-carbon strategies. Among other projects, Michael and his team have created digital twins of the city of Las Vegas and the city of Phoenix, as well as a new capital city in an Indian province. The use of digital twins in urban planning is expected to deliver $280 billion in savings globally by 2030, according to ABI research, and Ernst & Young also projects that over the same time, modeling technology can reduce urban carbon emissions by more than 50%, lower the cost of operating buildings by 35%, and improve productivity by 20%. We'll be hearing a lot more about digital twins in the news, so it's a technology we all need to understand. You can learn more about Cityzenith at Cityzenith, all one word, no dash, no space, cityzenith.com. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you today?
I'm terrific. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. I wanted to start off, this is actually what caught my attention and I wanted to reach out to you about. You recently endorsed United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statement that replacing fossil fuels in response to Russia's war on the Ukraine is madness, a form of mutually assured destruction, as devastating as nuclear war. Tell us what your models suggest will happen if humanity turns back to oil, gas, and coal instead of leaping forward to renewable energy. Just how bad is this going to get?
Well, we have been studying the impact of decarbonization in cities at scale using, as you mentioned, digital twin technology, which for those who aren't familiar, digital twins are virtual replicas of real things. Mm-hmm. In our case, in the objects in cities, buildings, networks, streets, roads, equipment, and people. And what's unique about digital twins is all these objects in the city are connected to the data in and around them. Mm-hmm. And therefore they can be used to scenario-wise a wide range of outcomes, from design and planning issues to how best to build things to how best to operate things, especially from a efficiency and emissions perspective. So we do look a lot at leveraging our technology, decarbonization opportunities in the cities, and then specifically how to decarbonize individual buildings and pieces of infrastructure. Buildings are 75 to 90% of emissions in cities. People think it's cars, it's actually buildings. So what we're looking at is what happens to cities if we, because we have so far to go, really. I mean, sure, you're asking what happens if we go back to oil? Well, we're basically on oil. So 1.7% of buildings in America are green. So 98.3% are not. And now in the cities around America, Washington, D.C., New York City, St. Louis, smaller towns like Ithaca, Boston, even entire states, Washington State, Maryland State, have passed legislation in the last 12 months requiring building owners to eliminate emissions. First time in American history. So this is going to happen because they know that this is the problem. They know it.
Do you see though, in response to the war, just to go back to my initial question,
sure.
Do you see a conversation about could we make changes to stay on oil or natural gas for longer? Is that a question that's coming up now?
I don't see that as a question. I think what we're seeing is the opposite question being asked, like how quickly can we get off of oil?
Great, that's a relief.
Given the fact that those, we've known this for many, many years. We've involved either in our own wars or observing wars over oil. And this
Mhm.
is and oh, to a certain extent, Russia is about oil again because Russia's wealth came from oil. So it is basically it's all about the energy economy. The Gulf War, this war, the even in the Second World War, Japan attacked us, so we couldn't attack them back and knock out our oil reserves. So it's really every war has really been about energy. In
Yeah.
the last 100 years or so. So with that in mind, I think if imagine this scenario: if Europe were actually carbon neutral and not dependent on fossil fuels, Russia wouldn't have amassed literally the financial war chest that it did that enabled them to do what they're doing. So I think we've seen over and over again that the dependence on a limited fuel source that is concentrated in certain areas of the globe has created nothing but geopolitical tension and if everything from trade wars to actual wars. And many of the places around the world where oil is concentrated are not places where America wants to be doing business, and they don't have our values. So often we have to compromise our values, as we've seen in places like Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, as we've seen also in Russia, and we've been buying their oil for years, right? So these are big problems. If all these places were actually, not dependent on fossil fuels, then none of this happens.
So let me turn the page from that conversation because I think that's a critically important one. But let's talk about specifically what a digital twin is like, because right now there's a lot of conversation about the metaverse, which frankly is a very old idea and that has been around for a long time. It's just getting a new life. But in the metaverse, people go into virtual spaces to dance and to talk, and a digital twin is a very different type of immersive 3D environment where everything is, as you said, linked to external data, which then allows you to test assumptions. Tell us about how an engineer or a city planner might work with a digital twin to begin to test their assumptions about the city.
Right. So, metaverse is just the idea of having this alternate universe where lots of different kinds of activities can take place. And the way it's being understood commercially from a retail perspective is a place you kind of go almost like a sim city, but it's real and you can interact and transact and whatnot. And that's a vision for it. There are different types of metaverses with that broad definition. An urban digital twin is a real world metaverse for a city that's connected to real data that's various stakeholders from the city to architects, engineers, planners, facility managers, building operators, real estate owners, et cetera, can all use to solve real world problems with real data. So the idea, I mean, it's kind of funny how these technology trends and nomenclature gets moved around. I agree, nothing very new about the idea of a metaverse. I think it's just simply, frankly, been inspired by Facebook's name change.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're now basically taking a very different direction from as a company. I don't think that changes what metaverses have been. SimCity has been around, Second Life has been around, Smart World, our product has been around. Those are all different kind of metaverses. I think what's unique about what we can do, with a real world urban digital twin, which you can call a metaverse, is that when we bring all of this data into a common framework, which by the way is very difficult to do, the kinds of information that city planners, that architects and engineers need to make good decisions, building owners, building operators, energy companies, is multifold in the building industry. There's at least 20, 30, 50, 70 major different types of technology that can participate in those very complex calculations. Building information modeling software, geographic information system software, Internet of Things software, sensors, public static data sets from the city. All these things are
weather data.
Yeah. Yes, all of this is part of the digital twin framework. So all this comes together. Now, when you do this, and you can actually bring that into a common architecture, which today doesn't happen, the kinds of simulations that we can run, the if-then scenarios are limitless. When we have data, we can determine where best to put new buildings, and not only that, but where to put the entrance on that building and the curb cut, that allows you to get into that building as a car. We can study the impact of a new building design in the middle of the city on microclimate conditions, on wind patterns, on pedestrian footfall.
So
because of all
for
the people
instance, you
coming.
could look at the urban heat effect, which is something we've talked about on this show and is a wide topic of discussion. And you
Sure.
could change the flow of air and greenery placement through the city in order to reduce the heat effect.
That's exactly right. And it's exactly what we did in the city you referenced in your introduction, the city of Amravati in South India, which we did with the renowned British architect Norman Foster. It was the first ever urban digital twin in the world. And what they were using it for, because that city in India is 110 degrees in the summertime.
Right.
And the amount of cooling, a lot of load you need to cool that type of infrastructure is massive. So the planners wanted us to be able to use the architects to use natural means to reduce temperature, landscaping, tall buildings with narrow passages to take direct sun off the street, all the things you do with traditional design, and to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
So we provided our digital twin product to the project, and architects from all over the world who are working on it were using one common environment to drag and drop and manipulate their buildings, and then simulate using a plugin that we had integrated from a Canadian company, simulate the impact of that design scheme on thermal heat map, wind patterns, emissions, average street temperature in the middle of summer, all kinds of over 120 different data sets we could simulate. And we were able to afford the architects the ability to design that district such that it could reduce the original planned heat footprint by 8 degrees Celsius.
Really?
At the same time, yeah, that's a huge win for a city, or even 1 degree Celsius can be catastrophic. So think about that. All these things could be simulated before anybody even moved a shovel.
So that's absolutely fascinating. One of the things, and I spent many years in the technology industry, so I am also painfully aware of the limits of every model, because every model is an approximation. So
Right.
We have to understand what the limits are today. But it sounds to me like when you talk about a digital twin, that it is potentially going to be able to evolve with the addition of new data sets to become just more and more granularly accurate in terms of its ability to do predictions. Is that an accurate assessment of where we are, that this is the beginning of an incredibly deep ability to design our built environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've been heading there for a while.
Yeah.
I think that there's been a confluence of other technologies that have come along in recent years to get us there, from the industry moving from paper drawings to 2D based computer-aided design, which is kind of big in the 80s and 90s, to 3D building information modeling, which is basically making a 3D model and then attaching data to the object. So if you're designing a building in 3D, suddenly you take the information for the structural column and you tag it to the actual 3D column, so it becomes a referenceable database. You're actually building with data. And that was a big innovation in the last 20 years. So without all these things, 5G, by the way, you can't get sensor data around very quickly. Without all these things, even open data, we started maybe, 12 years ago-ish? Now 50 countries have open data policies, 500 cities, so that's also helpful. So all these things kind of came together to make digital twins kind of possible now. And you can expect that they're going to be the norm for foreseeable future. And we're already seeing in this country digital twin RFPs from major cities like Orlando, like North Texas, several. So it's happening.
So now, as I listen to you talk about this, it's clear what we are talking about when we talk about the metaverse in the popular press right now is an escapist place. And you're talking about building a practical tool. Do you envision an era in which citizens and employees, everybody involved in an environment, might be able to enter a 3D experience to test what it could become? Could that be a different setting for public debate about what we want to make our society into?
Well, I think so. I think that I have different views on this, but yes, I think that where this is headed is that one of the major use cases for a city is the ability to explain, to understand the implications of policy decisions, planning decisions, et cetera, and
Mhm.
then to engage the public, and which traditionally doesn't happen in a very effective way. You know, the good old city town hall is usually a kind of prescribed forum with vested interests standing in the back of the room that
Yeah.
dominate the conversation, and it's just not very effective. This would give people a chance to see what's being planned, to discuss it, to make comments, all in a way in which they can very easily understand. I mean, to navigate it, to learn about it, um, just to explore it before anything actually happens. And it will change the way we design cities, because it will change the what's the best way to put this, the approach from being more top down to being truly collaborative. And we're not alone in thinking this. Lots of cities are changing the way that they think about planning these days to really pulling in the public, which they just didn't do in the past.
Well, and there was no way to show the public what you were talking about other than to say, here's the report. You'll need to read it and understand the data, but here the data can
exactly.
be represented into a tangible experience in some sense that
Right.
would you'd be, I mean, unfortunately, the only ideas that I'm coming up with right now are what happens when we ban books and what are the educational outcomes. But those are the kinds of debates that you could begin to model at a very deep level when we talk about, well, what if we did ban cars from downtown, or improve the number of bike lanes or the walkability of the city, and then extrapolate from that the overall reduction in emissions from the city. And then we're
Sure.
back to your initial point, which is buildings and the built environment are really what the problem, for lack of a better word, is with our society today.
Well, it's a big, it's a big, it's a monolithic problem,
It
because
is.
they were designed, buildings in particular, they were designed, unlike the transportation industry where there's only certain kinds of jet engines, there are many kinds of buildings out there. Every building in the world is a custom piece of art.
Exactly.
Even the So everyone is custom to a site, to a custom set of drawings, custom building permit. There's no cookie cutters out there. So inside the building, the legacy tools, the software tools that power that building, they could be from any, really any cocktail of existing controls vendors,
Mhm.
providing this chiller, that energy management system, that BMS, this. So all these combined together make a kind of chaotic framework. What we needed to do was to create what the digital twin really is kind of it's a new language that you drape on top of all this chaos. We use the recognizable visual imagery of the city and its objects to replace the need for you to understand all the other language of these software tools that are powering this thing, and make it gamified so that it's simple, make the interface neat, so that you could navigate around this environment and see a tremendous amount of information at the same time. Digital twins are not, they're transformational tools. It's not like another point solution you buy off and plug in. It's will fundamentally impact workflows, collaboration inside organizations. It'll break apart silos because everyone's working from a common data framework, not individually. So organizations that are deploying these are already beginning to discover this. And I'm kind of happy the way that American cities are figuring out that this is important, and we've seen a number of people come to us in the last year. Houston, Chicago. Now, these have come to us recently. I know we're working in Las Vegas, working in New York, Phoenix, working in lots of great cities. But really think that if America figures this out and can deploy this technology at scale, that I think we can transform and rebuild faster and better than we have seen happen overseas. And our Asian city peers that are basically kicking our butts down the street right now. If you've ever been to a city in China recently or Dubai, and you come home, it feels like you just came back to a developing country, and actually you're in Chicago or New York. And I think these types of, that's just a development cycle thing. We built after the Second World War.
Yeah, I agree. Where we are right now is it is our opportunity for our great leap forward. And it's one we have not taken now for almost 100 years.
Totally.
Do you think, though, that because as I think about how to engage students in this, to first off, so many kids these days feel like they have no agency, and in order to put them into this kind of environment and show them that they can learn to understand the impact of their decisions before they make those decisions, the possibility for reinventing the world is just it's almost unlimited. But are kids getting the education or the resources, access to things like this in their educations early enough and deeply enough for them to participate in designing their society?
I think so. I think I get incoming questions from university students around the world all the time, who are doing, not just asking what a digital twin is, but telling me they're doing papers on digital twins and they like to interview me. And they're from Australia, they're from the States, they're from China, across Europe, they're from everywhere. There's no, one came in from Turkey the other day. I'm working at ASU here in the States and several others here. So I think I feel that young people get this the best.
You would imagine who would.
I remember, this is funny, sitting in the early days of promoting this in conference rooms for large architecture firms, and there'd be 12 people sitting around listening to me speak. And we'd have the senior architects at the back, and we'd have all the younger people around the front of the table. And as I was presenting, all the young people absolutely understood what this is about.
Yeah.
A natural, like, of course. And the senior people were the ones who needed the educating. So I think I'm quite optimistic. The young people are smarter than they've ever been. They've grown up on technology. They probably can't understand some of the ways things have been done because they seem so archaic, but they're very happy to accept things that work. I'm confident that this young generation, in their 20s and 30s, is going to roll out the digital twin, call it, phenomenon in the years to come. I'm actually quite sold on that idea. I'm very enthusiastic about what this generation understands and what I think they're going to do with this technology.
So let me ask about the environmental impact of the technology itself. What kinds of compute resources are going to be required, from nanosensors placed all over the place so we have more data in order to understand what's going on, and all of the computation necessary to model the results when somebody makes a change? Just like blockchain, people are talking about that representing a vast amount of electric consumption. Is it sustainable after you make all the changes and so forth, the optimizations that result? Does it pay for itself both economically and environmentally to run these models in the long term?
Well, it's a couple of things. The amount of power necessary to run some of these decarbonization models isn't much. You can, using a lot of static data sets and relatively simple computations, run decarbonization models. Some of the systems of systems modeling and studies between, say, a transport system and a people management system, or maybe two different transport systems, those can be a little bit heavier. But you can also decide the periodicity of a study, and it doesn't have, if it's every 15 seconds, every hour,
Sure,
it can have an impact. I think when you look at the trade-offs in terms of the amount of, say, relatively small carbon used in the computer process that's necessary to make that calculation versus the millions of tons of carbon you're pulling out of the air from a decarbonization project at scale, I think it's inconsequential. I think that you might think you need 5 data centers to store a city's data. Actually, it fits on a CD. Make you laugh. There's not a whole lot of in real-time sensor data. You don't need in American cities. You don't need a lot of real-time data for these types of mainstay calculations. Even annual records can be adequate for some purposes from a warehouse. So I'm not so concerned about that part. I think the bigger issue for us is just going to be, like any new technology, spreading awareness and building adoption.
So does Cityzenith itself have a net zero goal, or are you running on renewable power now, is that part of your design to be a carbon neutral or carbon positive organization?
Well, yes, I think as a company, our footprint is so tiny because we rarely travel. We're all working
Mhm.
remotely. We don't even drive to work. So our own, carbon footprint as an organization would be, if this whole thing is an animal, it's the hair on the back of the buffalo. We're really concerned with the buffalo. How do we help the buffalo, which is 8,000 pounds? How do we help the city, get to these goals and automate it? Because the green building retrofit process, which is the only way to do this, is time consuming, it's expensive, it's risky, and it's custom. And there's no universe in which we can retrofit every building in America to meet 2050 goals.
Sure.
Even if every single American quit their job, every single American quit their job and started working on decarb projects right now, because we have 6 million office buildings and
Mhm.
100 billion square feet of real estate just in the office space. So we need automation. We need processes that take this very complex manual thing and turn it into a very automated, process-driven, structured thing that can happen quickly. And so that's what we're trying to do with digital twins here, is to take that complex decarbonization process, and which takes time. And that's, you mentioned this earlier, a digital twin model lives with the project. So as data is changing, the model is changing.
Right.
And this is important because with net zero buildings, they have to be certified every year for 5 years.
Mhm.
Okay. And in the Chicago area, we work with the Illinois Green Alliance. They had 12 net zero buildings completed last year. Only 6 were still net zero by the end of the following year. So you have to have a digital twin monitoring performance and simulating the tweaks on the fly to maintain that net zero status every year. We're so far away from that right now. I can't even tell you, between getting a real net zero building and all the problems we have with quality carbon credits out in the world, we're still pretty far away from these goals, to be honest, unfortunately.
Well, but on the other hand, when I think back to Lotus 123 and what we do with spreadsheets, models, and data sets now, I'm encouraged. There is, because we also evolve a lot more quickly as an industry, and there are
Sure.
so many urgent needs here that it doesn't sound like we're going to be resource constrained in terms of our ability to model, except to the extent that we are limited in terms of our access to data. And so putting more sensors out there, collecting more data and integrating different types of data so that they can interact is the big challenge. And that's data science, and that is what so many kids are going into today. They will be transformative.
Right.
Let me ask about another project you're working on, because it's very intriguing and we're running short on time. You're working on a model of the Amazon rainforest, and you're undertaking a carbon offset program to protect the remaining forest. How does that work? How does the model and the forest and your support of it interact?
Well, there's a initiative with the Brazilian government to effectively turn its forests into a massive carbon sequestration and money-making opportunities. They want to use digital twin technology to effectively map every meter, every square meter of the Brazilian rainforest, to be able to um, um, monetize it. The different qualities of forests have different levels of sequestration,
Right.
so that they can preserve it rather than chop it down. And so we're working with them to develop a framework for that. It just started.
That's interesting. So going back to this idea of being able to show people the benefit of something, you could even potentially show the loggers who are looking at a forest and thinking, gee, if I cut that down, I'm going to make a lot of money. But you could demonstrate that if they left it standing, that they could make more.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can show how the actual, we have a company that we're partnering with on this that even identifies the trees on that square meter. So you know which trees you have, you know how tall they are, you can see them, etc. They do these periodic, run throughs where they take photographs of them. And yeah, absolutely. The model will show how preserving and selling off, basically, or leasing the forest for carbon credits in return, is far more because you're getting money every single year for that. Once you chop a tree down, it's gone for 20 years. So, and then when you chop a tree down, you remove that sequestration capability from the forest. So really what should be happening here is to leverage it as we decarbonize. The model is one in which as our cities decarbonize, our forests all over the world should be growing. And if you look at the Massachusetts, they know this. If you look at the Massachusetts law, or the Boston law, rather, they have made a policy that they know that buildings can't get to net zero naturally because they use too much energy. So they're requiring them to buy offsets. They've very interestingly required buildings in Massachusetts and Boston to get 75% of their offsets from Massachusetts forests and the other 25% from the rest of the world. So they have even calculated that they don't have quite enough trees in Massachusetts to offset every building, but they can do 3/4 of it. So this is a brilliant plan, because now they're preserving all of Massachusetts forests, probably going to start regrowing them. Okay. They're buying the rest from wherever, Malawi or Indonesia or the Congo or places that have lots of forests. So they're also helping Africa in the process. Nothing wrong with that, because a lot of these very densely forested, and the three most densely forested countries in the world are the Congo, Indonesia, and Brazil. All developing countries that have hundreds of millions of people in need. So in theory, this money that's being used to decarbonize American buildings should be used to re-energize American forests, American inner cities, and developing communities around the world. So it's everybody wins scenario if this gets rolled out correctly. But to get there, we need a common framework. And we're hoping that over time we can establish that.
Now, so, what we're talking about, it's not just an energy transition, but a revolution in the way we manage our lives, our resources, and our environmental impact.
Sure.
Let me ask you in conclusion, how inefficient, based on the modeling you've done so far, do you think society currently is, and how much more efficient can we become over the next couple of decades?
Great question. I think that in 20 years, there are cities that we are going to visit that'll be so far ahead that we're going to laugh at the way that we do things today. There is a future in which none of us will drive anymore. There is a future in which you won't have a car, but everything will be car as a service. They'll just pick you up and drop you off, and the car will go somewhere else. There are futures in which we'll have in-person video conference meetings are so effective that the need to move around doesn't really exist. I think that local farming is becoming such a thing. That's quite possible that the world's of megacities will give way to smaller communities which are more self-contained and completely optimized. I think all these things, are on the way. It's just a matter of time. We will look back in 20 or 30 years and say, I can't believe the days. Remember, your father used to own a car.
Yeah.
He used to have his own car, and he has to drive to work for 40 minutes and stand in line with other fathers and mothers. This will seem archaic before you know it. I think, the commute itself needs to disappear. So many things that are so fundamentally inefficient. And also, I think the thing that we need to see is, continued integration of activity in the city core, not the segregation of activities. And most American cities are doing this very successfully now. We did terribly. Post 70s, white flight out to the suburbs. Everybody worked in the city. Everybody lived outside the city. Vast zones of nothingness in between created all kinds of problems. Now we're reinvigorating the cities by having work, play, shopping, all in the same place, living next door to working. And I think that trend is going to be good for our cities too. We'll probably laugh at the times when all those things were separate. We could go on and talking about this, but you have public squares which are programmed. So in 2 hours, it's one thing. Next 2 hours is something else. And the next 2 hours is something else. I mean, it's going to be crazy.
Well, you're describing the difference between just sort of everybody randomly playing an instrument and orchestration.
You bet.
And so, Bill Gates says optimize, optimize, optimize. And to an extent, while sometimes he can be very impersonal in his perception of the world, that opportunity to tune society to be good for the planet, all the other species on the planet, and us at the same time is the kind of inspiring vision I think we're all aiming to work toward. And now Cityzenith does webinars on a regular basis. How can folks get in, learn more about this, and follow along with what City Zenith is doing?
Well, sure. Just you can go to our website, and you can register for any of the webinars coming up there. You can also send us a note at info@cityzenith.com, and we request to be put on the mailing list, and then we'll make sure that you hear from us. We communicate a lot with people these days. Because digital twins are kind of becoming a thing. I was on CNBC, Cheddar TV, and Bloomberg all like the week before. So, there's other places to see us too. But if you do write to us, we do our best to get back to everybody. So feel free to.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for taking some time to talk with us about digital twins and your vision of the future.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We've been speaking with Michael Jansen. He is the founder and CEO of Chicago-based Cityzenith, and you can learn more about Cityzenith at cityzenith.com. That's Cityzenith, one word, no dash, no space, cityzenith.com. What Michael is talking about is a profoundly powerful tool to complete a transformation in the way that we work together to make our future. The problem really is, how do we learn to collaborate with one another while tolerating our differences? And that's politics. We have to change our politics so that we can create the diverse range of local solutions to living that allow for local prosperity within a flourishing but sustainable human and natural world. Wow, we have a lot of work to do, but I think we have the tools to start to communicate with one another. One of the other things that occurs to me as I listen to Michael's comments is that it's going to be very different to be a politician, to be a marketer, to be a leader, because you're going to have to show, not tell people what they can do together. And showing them is an act of communication and inspiration that includes things like a digital twin, but also rethinking the way that we open up the conversation to one another. So lots of challenges ahead. And of course, Sustainability in Your Ear will continue to try to tease those challenges out and explain them so that everybody can be in the conversation. We'll be back with another interview soon. In the meantime, folks, please take a few minutes to share this conversation with Michael Jansen, with your friends, folks that you work with. Get started talking about how you can potentially remodel your world, starting with ideas that you test with a computer online, and then share that information with one another in interesting and potentially immersive ways. This is Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, and I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.